Welcome everyone today for the panel discussion focused on resetting, refreshing, and resisting. My name is Jacqueline Musiitwa. I'm Zambian and I'm based in South Africa, and I'm excited to moderate this panel today. I have a great lineup of panelists to help us talk through the points of how women leaders are rebuilding for the ongoing fight. We've dealt with COVID-19 in the past year. Economies are not doing so well. People are dealing with a lot of personal negative experiences, positives as well. But we're really looking to this panel to help inspire us, not only now, but into the future. I'll read the list of panelists and their affiliations and give them a moment to introduce themselves in the order that I read them out. Dr. Esther Ngumbi is an assistant professor in the Department of Entomology and African American Studies at the University of Illinois, and she's from Kenya. Jamila Headley is a chief of staff at the Center for Popular Democracy in Barbados. Elisa Munoz is the executive director of IWMF in the US. Maria Ronderos is the director of Latin American Center for Investigative Journalism, and she's from Colombia. Thank you so much to our panelists today. So we'll go ahead and start with Esther. Take us away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I am humbled to be participating in this conversation. As earlier introduced, I am originally from Kenya. I now live at the United States, and I am an assistant professor here at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So being a researcher, a woman scientist, means that I am in the front line, working every day to find solutions to our global challenges. And my line of research is specifically focusing on how we will grow food to feed ourselves now and into the future more sustainably and more equitably. As we know, just because of COVID-19, we've seen so much inequities between how food is grown, how it's distributed, and who gets to eat. And so my research over the years has really been focused on sustainable food growing. How do we grow crops without pushing so much pesticides? How do we grow food without harming our environment, knowing that we don't have planet B? And how do we grow food knowing that we are living in the crisis of climate change, another silent crisis that we've not taken seriously? And so because we've not taken seriously, here we are. So I'm very excited about my work every day. As I go to the lab, I am excited because I never know what I'm going to discover and what is it that I am going to find out and be able to share from our lab back to the population. But above all, I am an activist. I work with so many things because I'm passionate about, first of all, food security, and then women empowerment, youth empowerment, education, knowing that education is a liberation. As Mandela said, Nelson Mandela, education is really a tool to fight poverty. So I'm very committed to that. 2021, I am excited about resetting and resisting, and knowing that moving from 2020, we knew that it is possible to achieve so many things against so many challenges that 2020 pushed into us. So as I turn the page of 2021, I am personally excited knowing that we can push the limits. We can shatter glass ceilings as women, and I want to shatter them in my research, in the work I do, and above all, I'm excited. I'm really excited as a woman to continue the fight and to continue resisting. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much for that. I'm definitely ready to hear more about your journey. I mean, climate change is coming up more and more, not only in widespread media, but also political leadership finally starting to take it serious from countries like the US with the incoming Biden administration, but also countries like China. which have particularly large footprints. So I definitely look forward to hearing more. Jamila, on to you.
So first, I have to make a little correction to my bio. These times in the middle of this pandemic have allowed us to do, have been really hard and have also allowed us to do strange things like work remotely. And so I'm working remotely from Barbados, where I was born, but I am actually the chief of staff at the Center for Popular Democracy, which is based in the United States with offices in DC and New York. I started this job on March 2nd. And so at the end of my first week was making the decision with our leadership team to send our staff home to work remotely indefinitely. We had no idea how long it would last. And so it's been quite a wild ride over the last year of trying to lead a team and get to know a team remotely. But just to say a little bit about what I do, ironically, for the last 15 years of my life, I've worked on global health, on pandemics, and on the right to health all over the world. And my work has been globally focused. In 2016, as you would know, in the United States, we had an election that led to Donald Trump rising to power. And that for me was such a galvanizing moment. I was in New York at the time, and I ended up working with other activists that I knew to try to organize people around how to respond to the Muslim ban, how to respond to the kids in cages. And so I would work my day job, which was in global health as an activist all over the world. And I would, in the evenings, be going to meetings with hundreds of activists in New York around how to respond to this administration, something that I never imagined myself doing as a visitor in the United States and as a non-citizen, kind of caring so much about what the leadership of the country did. And so, last year when I was looking ahead to 2020 and seeing the election coming up, I really just felt really called to the work of doing domestic US focus work for the first time, and really trying to do whatever I could to throw down to make sure that we did not have 4 more years of Donald Trump. And so this year for me has been a year very much in the belly of the beast. I started the job and the pandemic hit, and our organization is a network of people-based organizations in 35 states, DC and Puerto Rico. And in New York City, where we have several affiliates, our affiliates, largely immigrant rights groups, many of them immigrants to the United States, many of them essential workers, were incredibly hard hit. Within the first 2 months of the pandemic, one of our affiliates, Make the Road New York, had lost 60 people, had died from their membership base due to COVID. And so we were in rapid response mode. We were raising funds for direct relief to families who had been affected by the pandemic, who couldn't bury loved ones or who had lost income or couldn't pay rent. We were responding on a federal level, trying to shape policy and win whatever we could to cover people who were losing income, who were newly unemployed, and cover people also who were undocumented or immigrants to this country. And and we were all in the thick of that. And then in May, we had murder after murder of a Black person by the police. We had these encounters with white supremacy in the United States, and just how deadly it can be for many of us Black people. And, I found myself flying to DC in the middle of a pandemic. I was trying to stay put for so long to work with the Movement for Black Lives to organize the big Juneteenth protest in Washington, DC. And then it has been a sprint to the election. And so, for months I was working long days when we're talking about resting and resetting and resisting, really not resting very much, because we had this goal in mind. We needed to do everything we could to make sure Donald Trump didn't get another 4 years. And I'm so proud of the work that our affiliates, many of our affiliates in Arizona, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in key swing states did to help make sure that we could win this election. And recently in Georgia, in the last few weeks, to help make sure that we could also take the Senate. But it's also been a year for me of learning a lot about the difference between stretching and overextending myself, as Audre Lorde says, and learning a lot about what it means to be in this movement for the long haul, because we won the election, but it doesn't feel satisfying because right now, as we speak, you know, ultra-right people are tearing apart the capital of the United States, right? And right now, DC is looking more militarized than ever, right? And what we know is that as we gain power, and this is true for women, this is true for movements, as we gain power, we face resistance. And so we need to figure out how we can sustain and pace ourselves for the long haul. And so I'm so interested for this discussion today because I feel like I'm reflecting and learning and constantly failing as well and learning from that in this work of finding the balance between resting and resisting.
Yeah, Jamila, I think you made a really important point about stretching and overextending, because I think it is important for us to recognize at all times that our most important asset, you know, is our body. And so understanding that balance and those boundaries is really critical to making sure that we're successful in everything we do. On that note, I will move on to Elisa, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Thanks so much. Hi, I'm Elisa Munoz. I'm the Executive Director of the International Women's Media Foundation. I am originally from Spain. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and like so many others you've been hearing from, I also returned to my roots and am now living in Spain and working remotely, which I have found very grounding and much more peaceful than being in Washington, D.C. right now. 2020, I think we are defining at the IWMF as a year of pivoting. We had to shift everything. We're an international organization that was doing work on the ground around the world. Every month we had training sessions, hostile environment sessions, journalism skills building in Africa and Latin America. And all of a sudden we could not do that any longer. We really quickly decided to change the way that we operate, and we decided to put our focus on helping women journalists suffering specifically from the impact of COVID-19. And we built one of the largest COVID relief funds for journalists in the world. Through that, it was a horribly difficult experience for me and my staff to hear story upon story of women journalists. But through that, we were able to learn about the real needs of women on the ground, what they were experiencing, what they needed help with, and to use that information to focus and to tell our funders, our partners, what was going on the ground around the world. And I hope that the relief that we offered some of these journalists that were unable to work, unable to come home, unable to report, being fired from their place of work. I hope that the little help that we were able to offer really allowed them to stay in an already inequitable news industry, because what we wanted to focus on was saving diverse voices and making sure that they could continue in the industry and not be shut out, where we would have to begin again with a male-dominated, mostly white-dominated industry, particularly in the United States and Europe, where women would be shut out because of COVID-19. So that was our focus. We also, like so many organizations, found out that we can live anywhere in the world and deliver valuable, impactful programming virtually to even more people than we ever thought was possible. So many silver linings in this horrible experience that was 2020. And one of them is that our ability to expand our reach, to do it with less resources, and to be able to continue our important work regardless of where we are forced to live. So that was a huge lesson for us. The importance of focusing on the individual journalists so that they can stay in the industry, and to maintain diversity in the news media at all cost, because if we lose that, we've lost everything. So I will leave it there. Thank you.
Really, really pertinent points. You know, COVID-19 has definitely taught us how do we do more with fewer resources. But also, I think what has been amazing has been tapping into people's goodness and just really seeing that a lot of people do care about causes. And last year was definitely a time to refocus on efforts, I think, at least personally, that I hadn't thought about for a while. And I think to your point of women, I think it's really important because from an employment perspective, from a domestic perspective, unfortunately, COVID-19 has hit us the hardest, whether it means assuming more responsibility at home, losing jobs, domestic violence, go down the list. Unfortunately, women have definitely bared the brunt. And so, I mean, kudos to you for the work you're doing, because it is really important now more than ever to make sure that women's voices continue to be heard and that we are able to find ways to better support one another, to do the work that we do that is ever so important. So thank you for that. And Maria, last but not least.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I've been listening to all of you and I feel very humbled by your experience. We are a bunch of friends. We got together 5 women from Latin America, from different countries, from Brazil, from Argentina, and from Costa Rica. And we decided to set up CLIP, which means Center for Latin American Investigative Journalism. And we started it in the second semester of 2019. So of course, you can believe when the pandemic hit us, we were just starting to get our feet off the ground. We were just starting and it was really hard. We thought we were not going to be able to make it when we saw these and growing and growing. But we decided to strength up and think about what we do. So what we do is we support or we work with media, investigative journalists all around Latin America. We can come together to investigate things that are not possible to investigate from a single country, either because it's too dangerous or either because the whole story you cannot find in one country because it's actually a story that goes through different countries and in order to really understand how a whole system works. So the kinds of stories we've been doing throughout this last year and a half has been, for example, what is the whole story of the migrants that come from Africa and Asia into Latin America and try to go to the United States? That story hadn't been told really as a complete story. And we worked with colleagues in Africa and Asia, and it was a very, very emotional and very strong story. And we were very proud to be able to have it and complete it by May this year, despite COVID and despite everything else. We were able to report it and publish it. Also, we have been doing a lot of reporting and have already published 2 big investigations. These are all like putting together 10 media from different countries. Some of the media are small, some are huge. And this last, we have been doing a lot of research and investigation on the agenda of the extreme religious right, extreme right in fundamentalist religious groups that using the Trump agenda and the White House agenda at the moment, we're actually pushing a very conservative agenda for Latin America, and even really had played a very important role in, for example, weakening the missions, anti-corruption missions in Central America, in weakening the peace process in Colombia. And so we have exposed all of this in different stories. We have also been, of course, reporting on COVID because that was a bomb that exploded in our hands. And what we have been doing is mostly trying to hold governments to account. What is it that governments are they spending the money in the real people who really need it? Or is this an excuse to spend lots of emergency money on the wrong places? So this is what we've been doing. It was very, very exhausting. By the end of the year, we were Zoom tired. We were absolutely exhausted of being in Zoom all day. You have to take care of yourself and take a rest of the many hours of Zoom. And so we did take a little break in December, and we are now reset. and refresh. And we already have 2 or 3 investigations on the move that are really exciting. One that has to do with the environment, and the other one that has to do with the security issues in Latin America. So we are full of energy. We have a much friendlier government now in the US, which makes things a little easier probably, or at least we feel more supported and more supportive. And we really hope we can help journalists throughout Latin America, hold power to account wherever that power is when they are abusing their power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. You make such an excellent point on accountability. And I think what has been amazing over the past year is, news outlets, people really coming up and saying, you know what, that is fake news, not what's being called fake news in the mainstream, but people really coming out and kind of the idea of not only citizen journalism, but people just using social media to come out and expose stuff. Now, when we talk about COVID spending the world over, lots of controversies there. But I think it's important that, it's a reminder to us that, we hold the keys to our leaders' accountability. And it's important for us not only to diversify where we get our information, but to make sure that we are using the best news sources to get that information. So I'll use that as kind of my jumping point, and I'll open this up to the panel. I'll let kind of just raise your hand or so I can see you. But I guess looking at the past year, the most successful leaders at combating COVID were the female presidents and prime ministers and the like. So going back to kind of my congratulations to all of you and all of the work you're doing, very, very impressive and very impactful. But my question is, how does being a female leader influence your leadership style? And what unique traits do you espouse in your leadership? And what are you especially proud of in your leadership style? And what should other men and women learn from you?
Silence.
I'll start with you, Maria, since your mic is still on.
Okay. Well, I think women, we have something that has made it possible to overcome so many obstacles this year, is the fact that we communicate better, that we really put an emphasis on how we communicate. We listen and we connect. And it's difficult to create a team or do what you're doing, be with your kid and at the same time be in the middle of the panel. I think women, we multitask and we communicate. So with my team, for example, that was all over the place, somewhere in New York, part of the team is in Costa Rica, part of the team is in other parts in Brazil. So I think what I was proud of as a leader or as a team builder was that I was able to communicate with people and listen. And when they were not happy or they were sad or they were going through the most horrible moment because of the lockdowns and because of all of these, or because they had to deal with children and at the same without schools and at the same time try to work and all at the same time, it was a woman that would listen and that would try to connect and try to find solutions around. So women, I think we can multitask, we can communicate, and we can be very practical. Sometimes less obsessed with what, and of course I'm generalizing, but less obsessed with what looks important and more obsessed with what works. And I think in that way, that's what I felt more proud about.
I love
Great,
that.
thank you. What about you, Jamila?
Yeah, I love that, Maria. And I'll jump in here. It's hard whenever I am in conversations like these and we were talking about women leadership, it's like very hard for me to talk as my leadership as a woman. For me, it's like as a Black woman, as a woman living with a disability, because I live with a disability, like those are all like very, as a Caribbean woman, Those are all deeply embedded in my identity, and I think deeply embedded in how I lead. And I think there are two big standouts for me in 2020 that I kind of noticed in myself and in the way that I worked. And I also noticed that people struggled with, right? Like sometimes you can see what you're strong at because you see what others are grappling with, right? Like, and I think one thing is, this ability to hold ambiguity or duality. Like, I think it's something that I see a lot of women, Black women in particular, friends who are able to do that. So like this ability to be somewhere between apathy and optimism, and like not lost in that, not immobilized by that duality. This ability to be somewhere between self-doubt and overconfidence, and not lost in that, right? Like, and so I think dealing with ambiguity became really important, because when you think about when the pandemic hit, nobody, I think lots of people thought that, oh, maybe this will be a month or two and then we'll be done. And, for me, having worked on pandemics for years, I was like, guys, this is going to be a couple years. And so in my mind, I could both see that this was going to be a long haul, but knew that my task at hand was actually dealing with what we knew right now, right? And so send staff home, set them up well, figure out what people need, listen, give people time to pause. As an organization, really proud of the fact that we gave people 15 extra days to use in increments of how they want to do childcare, to take care of themselves through the year off. We, extended our holiday break to 2 weeks because we knew people had really pushed so hard through the election and needed a break. And so we were doing all these things as personnel policies, but we weren't stopping our work in the world. We were still holding the reality that there was real urgency in the world, right? And actually people were suffering pretty profoundly, and that we could do something to intervene in that. So this idea of holding duality and ambiguity, I find it's something that like we're fluent in many ways, right? And that fluency was really an asset last year. And then the last thing is resilience. I love that word. It's not strength, it's not a bravado, it's something that's actually earned, and often earned and gained through really hard stuff, right? And again, Black women, people with disabilities, like we've been through hard things. Like we've had to deal with the world not going the way that we want it to go. We've had to deal with massive injustice. We know what it looks like to have scarce resources and have to figure out how to make it work within these scarce resources. That resilience, that has got to be the theme of 2020, right? Like, the organizations that I've seen thrive despite the odds, the countries that you've seen thrive despite the odds, the ability to be resilient is just such an asset. And it's something that actually I've come to value a lot more, like, and value in my friendships, value in my work, this ability to just to stay with it in the present, no matter how hard, and to find a way. And what we saw come out of that resilience was so much creativity. We had to take all of our programs. We had this whole plan to knock on, thousands of doors and reach 7 million people to get them out to vote. And then all of a sudden, nobody could be on the doors and nobody could do the plan that we had. And so we had to pivot, to use a word again that was used here. And we did. And we came up with all sorts of great ways of using digital media and technology to really reach people in ways that were really powerful. So, I think there's something about women leaders, there's something about people who have been oppressed, overlooked, downtrodden. There's something about people against whom the injustices are stacked so high. And it's not a silver lining because we shouldn't have these injustices anyway. It's not right? But we are resilient, and I just feel like that's the leader. Like when I interview people now, I'm looking for other people to join. I'm looking for resilience. However, you can tell that, not for bravado, not for necessarily who has the longest resume or whatever, but how resilient are you is a question that I think I'm going to be asking a lot in 2021.
Great, thank you so much, Jamila. Resilience is a great one for sure. Esther, take us away. Resilience, duality, practicality, multitasking. What are your traits?
think for me, it was the empathy and reflecting on 2021 when COVID just started. I was about to just take my part of teaching the class. And here we are, all of us, assistant professors, and students, our students, we were all thrown in confusion and literally had to take on in-person class back to virtual. And with some of us, it was my beginning year. I wasn't prepared for anything. And so I took myself in the seat of our students and everybody and realized we're all hurting. We all have been thrown into new territories and we all are resetting. So I took it upon myself to be empathetic, to be a little flexible in that if I needed the assignment to be turned in, let's say 1 week, and a student emails and says, I've been dealing with COVID-19 in my family. I'm a little bit overstressed. So it was just pushing on the empathy, the listening more, the assuming you are the person that's sharing what's going on in this life and not being judgmental. But above all, I think as women leaders, we're strategic thinkers. I think, and sometimes I think the world has not truly valued, and I think there should be more research that's done on what are these key things that come out about women and their leadership style that took us through COVID-19. You know, you look at Australia and New Zealand and many other women leaders just aced it all. And, you know, in our own Georgia with Stacey Abrams and so many female leaders just who like truly became icons. But we are yet to also further know what are these characteristics and to truly, and Kamala Harris, I mean, I was watching her documentary yesterday. I think even, you know, within 2020, while there was a lot of Black things, we saw the rise of women, and I celebrate that every day. I stop for a moment and I celebrate that success that was achieved. And I hope as we go to 2021, these lessons of the female leaders, all of you that are right now, we're in a conversation together, you already shared about how resilient, how you're able to just shine. But, you know, combining these qualities and saying, yeah, we are the women, and we're speaking, as we said, we're speaking, listen to us. This is, if you want to lead, if you want to achieve, this is the style of leadership. And we are drawing from lessons that, you know, we've really seen by example. So we're not trying to try new ground. So I respected everybody. And above all, also, I think the support from the men in our lives and also our partners, I think, and family, and all of a sudden everybody cared. And I hope that we take that care for one another. Everybody would ask, how are you all doing? How is everything going on? And we uplifted one another throughout the pandemic. I wish now we continue with that, what we began in 2020, uplifting each other, reaching out. Hey, what's hurting you? How can I be of help? Moving together rather than moving apart, empowering each other so that we rise, and there's women that rose in 2020 can continue. We can break as many glass ceilings. We can see more Kamala Harris rise up. I'm so excited for the next 4 years. Yay! Go Black women! Yeah. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Esther. I think you end on a really powerful note there. I mean, communicating, uplifting, you know, empathy, you know, really great. And more importantly, women voices and women leadership voices. Elisa, you're next. Would love, I mean, you're focused on women communicating and, you know, all the journalists in your network that you work with. So it'd be great to hear kind of your leadership traits.
Absolutely. I sympathize with the empathy. I think that's huge. I'm going to say that authenticity was really important this year. I think that as we saw our world as we know it fall apart in front of us, it kind of gave us license to not hold back any longer and to really be ourselves. I remember when I was younger learning at a professional development seminar that you do your best work at places where you can be your authentic self and where you're not pretending to be somebody else or to have a different attitude. And I think this year we were all forced to be a little bit more authentic, be it asking for help or pulling the shades off and really looking at what's most important for your organization and the people that you serve, and not being afraid to redirect and say, you know what, that is really important, but right now we're dealing with a crisis and we're just going to focus on this, and that's okay. Also, this ability to just at the beginning of the pandemic, as Jamila was saying, just to call it, just to have the strength to take the risk to say, this, I don't know the answers to this, so I'm just going to call it. I'm not going to do our live fundraiser in 8 months from now. I'm going to close the office for a year, and the chips will fall where they may, but at least I'm going to be able to know my path rather than deal with the monthly unknowns. And I think that the strength that being a woman leader brought me to where I am, and having led this organization for quite some time, is just having the confidence at a time of crisis, whereas maybe in times that aren't as critical, I had even less confidence, if that makes sense. I realized that like this was, I had to step up, and I wasn't afraid to do it. And my primary mission was to serve the people who needed our help. And I think that that's what drives women the most. And when they do their best work, I always tell young reporters when they're negotiating for salaries, pretend that you're negotiating for somebody else, because that's when women really rise up. And I think that these unfortunate times have had women shine through, because we are forced to work on behalf of so many other people who are suffering and who need our help. And I think being your true self and being authentic will get you through that.
Thank you for that, Elisa. I love the focus on service, and you're right. I mean, we ultimately, many people are most fulfilled when they are serving others, and especially women, whether we're forced to or whether it is by choice. So I think refocusing our efforts and really being authentic in what we do is really important. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and it's been such a great conversation. But just to conclude, you've given us such great information and lessons from 2020, but looking forward to 2021, we'll quickly go down through the list, and we'll start with you, Elisa. Just what is your one word for 2021? What will be that word that you keep on repeating to yourself over and over to get through this year?
I think I would use the word thrive. I think we forget to thrive in times of crisis, and we know that it's possible. So let's thrive.
Great. I will go on to you, Esther. One word.
Wow, that's difficult. Can I put two?
Okay, two is fine.
I will walk along with everyone.
Okay. Great. Enough said. Okay, Jamila.
Elisa, you took my word. It's definitely thrive. I've been thinking about a lot, and for me, it's like thinking about it personally, which is really hard. I can very easily think about what it takes for an organization to thrive, or a team to thrive. But I think last year I really neglected to think about what I needed to thrive, and at the end of the year, I was pretty burnt out and pretty ill. And so this year, I'm really expansively looking at that word and that concept of thriving.
Thriving again. So two for thriving. This is great. And Maria, last but not least.
For me, it's creativity. I think we need to reinvent the world in many ways, and journalism in a way is dying, and we are in the end where it's creating it and inventing it, and that's what I want to do and we want to do. And I think it's a wonderful year to recreate the world, a better world.
Thank you so much, ladies, from thriving to recreating to working and walking along together. I really look forward to following all of your journeys. And thank you so much for such an amazing conversation. I'm definitely inspired, and I hope everyone is as well. Thank you.
Thank you all. I am absolutely inspired.
Thank you so much.
So great to meet you all, and thank you, Jacqueline, for
Take care.